it's so nice for me. It makes it much better experience. So finally, the red light has turned on. I'm going to pop up my PowerPoint. So today, like I said, we're going to be looking at the Nile River. We're going to look at the Nile River Delta as well. We're going to be looking at some of the advantages of the Nile that it had. We're going to be using this PowerPoint throughout the week, which we're going to get all the way from the very beginnings of Egypt to its unification under Narmer. Yes, Alicia, darling.
Never mind. I'm going to wait until you actually start the PowerPoint to comment on it.
All right, so this is based from chapter 5.1 of your text. So here we see a satellite image of the Nile River and, of course, the Nile River Delta. What do we notice about this? What do we notice about this? Rylan?
It's like there's like different like sections of lines going with the river.
All right, so different section of lines. Cool. What did you want to say, Alicia?
There's sort of along the Nile River, there's a bunch of green.
Yeah, along the Nile River, there's a bunch of green. What do you think that? What do you think that represents?
I think that represents land.
Well, this is all land. What do we think this tan is, and what do we think this green is?
I think the tan is like sand and stuff, and the green is like grassland.
Yeah, I wouldn't say grassland. What do you want to say, Danielle? But you're exactly this. Tan is sand.
Like fertile land?
Fertile land, yeah, from the river. Very good. Now, the Nile River is going to be critical. Without the Nile River, there would be no life in Egypt or in Kush. People are like, what's Kush? It's the kingdom south of Egypt. We'll talk about it later. Now, I am never, ever going to say on a Quizzy Poo or Tessie Poo, say, how long is the Nile River? I'm not going to do that. But it's extremely long. Some atlases will say the Nile River is the longest river in the world. Other atlases say the Amazon River is the longest river in the world, which is very confusing. And why they can't just decide which one is longer frustrates me to no end. They are both extremely long, with the Nile River being over 4,000 miles. And the thing about the Nile, just like the Tigris and Euphrates rivers of Mesopotamia, the Nile River flooded every year. And you say, Mr. Kenny, that's not special. Well, guess what? It was predictable. So yes, it was special. They knew when it was going to be. In Mesopotamia, you had the problem where Gus would build his house right by the river. He'd plant his crops early, and the flood would come, wash his house and his crops away. Whereas in Egypt, Samuel knew, well, the river's going to flood at this time, so then I'm going to plant my crops right after the flood because then I'll have all the beautiful fertile soil. It's going to be amazing. And of course, just like our Tigris and Euphrates rivers, when the river flooded, there was tons and tons of silt. And that's why we have the striking distance in the satellite image here, where we have sand, barrenness, nothing. Beautiful, green, lush, amazing. Look at this picture. Barrenness, nothing. Beautiful, green, lush, amazingness. I love it. So the Nile River is going to give a lot of things to the people of Egypt. I'm so glad that you and we're going to say the same thing there. Love it. So first off, obviously, you can take a bath. You can drink some water. Everyone, fifth graders always say, I'm like, what's a river good for? They're like, taking a bath? You guys, I'm glad you're so focused on cleanliness because you don't want to be stinky. But that's the first thing everyone says. It also provides food, of course, because, Carson can go fishing. He can now have some protein, which is great. And someone noted before that other animals need water too, so they're going to go to the river to drink. We have irrigation of crops, just like we had in Sumer. I'll get to you in one moment with your question or comment, darling, I promise. So we're going to be able to have lots of farming because of the irrigation of crops. It also provides transportation, as we see with these sailboats. They are going to use the river basically as a water road to be able to travel and trade and to get goods. I mean, you think about the pyramids, how they're created with these incredibly heavy, amazing stones that were quarried much further upriver than downriver. Finally, the Nile River is also going to provide defense, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next slide. Yes, Alicia, what would you like to say, darling?
nothing. I have had a comment, but then
Okay.
you said the next thing, which was what my comment was, so I
Okay.
took my hand down.
Yeah, that's why sometimes I told kids to hold on, because I can sometimes predict some of the things you guys will talk about. All right, so continuing on. So let's look at the Nile Delta. Now, the Nile Delta, I'm actually going to back up just to make sure you know, is this part and the northern part of the Nile River. This is where all the flooded the silt like piles up, and that's why like this is this fanned or triangle shape. Delta, you know, in Greek, it's like a triangular shape, and it's because of this right here, this idea. And so this is going to be the most fertile part of Egypt. They called it the land of Goshen in the book of Exodus. It was the very, very best farmland. And it's because of all of the silt. I mean, pretty much lands could throw some seeds, Kalen could walk on them, and that's enough. You didn't even need a plow, and beautiful plants and delicious things would grow in it. They call this the Black Lands because of the silt, and it's very arable, meaning very farmable, very good. And right to the side of it, though, it's called the Red Lands, which is the desert, where it's got great protection. So Mariah likes chilling out in the Black Lands because she can grow all sorts of food, have her full tummy, and not have to worry about roving bands of, you know, Caleb's going and attacking and conquering. We now get to the cataracts, which we see pictured here. Cataracts are a fancy word for waterfalls. And waterfalls are going to be a huge defensive aspect of the Nile River because we have Divine. He is in Kush, and he really, really wants to go conquer Egypt and live in a pyramid for his house. So he's on his boat. He's going and rowing his boat from south and where Kush is. And then just like in the cartoons, he's rowing, and all of a sudden like, oh, there's not much resistance here. I feel like I'm rowing through air. Then he looks down and he realizes he's gone over a waterfall. There is air, and then he drops down and goes kasplat. Not a great way to start your day, going kasplat from a waterfall. And that's what happened, basically. So in the south of the Nile River, so far upriver, we have all of these waterfalls, which made navigating the river impossible. And so therefore, it was going to be very difficult for invaders to come from the south. So we see it's difficult for invaders to come from the east and the west because of the deserts, difficult for invaders to come from the south because of the cataracts, and even off from the north as well because of how the Nile Delta was. Water navigation was not super simple either. Yes, Alicia, darling.
If I remember correctly, the Egyptians had like beliefs about the different sides of the river. If I remember correctly, the east side was like a good side, and then I'm pretty sure it was the west side that was really evil.
I don't remember entirely. It probably has something to do with the afterlife, but we'll get to stuff like that a little bit later on. Right now, we're just focusing on geography, but we'll focus on Egyptian religion soon. So here's an awesome picture of a cataract, aka waterfall. So, you know, like we said, we've got Divine. He's floating, 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 all happy, thinking about how he's going to have a pyramid as a house. Then, wah! And again, wah! Yeah, not fun, not fun. Here we see the cataracts are around this part. So we see classical Egypt is going to be over here, and right south of Egypt are all these cataracts. Here's a zoomed in part. Now, the Egyptians, they will go further south into the second cataract and things like that. But there we go. And that's going to be our notes for the day. I'm going to end our recording right